One thing I would usually advise people on is, think about the team that you're building. So I come from restaurants, I come from service industry, and it became very clear to me early on in my career that I, in order to achieve the goals that I want to achieve, I can't do it on my own. I actually have to have a team under me. And when I was kind of like an arrogant, cocky college grad, I thought, this team that I was put in charge of were just like numbers on a spreadsheet there to like help me achieve my goals. But really, your team is your team is one of the most important assets you can build. It's no different for a startup.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as a founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Justin Rowe. And Justin had, in his own words, had a normal high school experience. Was a C student and liked to play during school, and then graduated and went to work in the restaurant business. Also got a degree in a general business degree in college. And worked at a restaurant for a period of time as an assistant manager. Ended up running over a restaurant running a restaurant, not running over a restaurant for someone else, and then discovered LinkedIn and shared his journey, and then connected with a group of people that were looking to build a chain of restaurants, opened up a Potbelly restaurant, and then acquired 3 additional ones, and then started kind of more as a side hustle, LinkedIn outreach that later became an agency. Sold the side hustle, but kept a small portion of the agency that he's still running, and is opening another office for the agency. So with that much as introduction and hopefully mostly accurate, welcome on our podcast, Justin. And it looks like you may be on mute, Justin. So
My bad.
I'll say it one more time to even make it a grander entrance. Welcome on the podcast, Justin.
I appreciate that. And yeah, that was a pretty accurate introduction. I appreciate that. I'm happy to be here.
Well, awesome. Well, excited to have you on and looking forward to a great discussion. So now as we kick off the podcast a bit, I gave the quick 45-second overview of a much longer journey, but let's go back a bit in time to tell us a bit how your journey got started as in quotes average high school experience.
Yeah, I can definitely dive into that. You want me to start back in the kind of the high school college phase?
Just start where the journey begins, and then we'll move our way to the present.
Yeah, like you said, I had a pretty typical high school experience. I went to a public school. I played soccer. I wasn't that academic. I felt like I was smart enough to get by without trying too much. So I didn't try too much, which usually landed me in the C/B territory, without studying too much. So I coasted through high school, coasted into college. It was kind of the same, except at college, I discovered I actually really like numbers and finance and business. I wish I had taken more marketing courses. It was more heavy in stats and finance. And then I ended up just graduating with a general business degree. But then, yeah, life I was the first to graduate college in my family. So I didn't really get that was the big advice, is go to college and finish. It wasn't like I didn't know about internships and getting relevant experience, and, the idea that my general business degree wasn't actually going to end in something like tangible, like accounting or, some kind of job waiting for me. So I took work where I could find it, which was in the restaurant industry where I had the most experience. Started as assistant manager, making $24K a year. And the one good thing about restaurant industry is that there was kind of a lack of quality talent leadership. And I managed to move my way up pretty quickly to managing my own restaurant, training other salaried managers, to the point where, yeah, I discovered LinkedIn to try to find better opportunities for myself. And I took a very aggressive approach, especially at that time. This was 6, 7 years ago. And I was sending 50 connection requests a day to people that might have opportunities. So
So
hiring
let me,
managers.
yeah,
Yeah.
jump in really quick just with a question. So I mean, during this time, you discovered LinkedIn, but you were still, as I understand it, you were still working in the restaurant industry, and I think you mentioned that you started out as a restaurant assistant. You worked your way up to restaurant assistant manager, if I can't get too tongue tied, and then you ended up kind of taking over running that restaurant. Is that kind of where you were at as far as kind of the full-time gig as you were starting to discover and dive into your LinkedIn journey?
Yeah, but at the time I was a general restaurant manager. So I was in charge of my own restaurant and I was training the salaried managers in the surrounding area. And I I had gotten burnout. I kind of realized I didn't want to move up in that ladder. So I was really looking for other opportunities. I really had kind of been disillusioned to like moving up that ladder and was looking for something else. So yeah, I took to LinkedIn to try to see what else was out there. And that's when, yeah, I took that approach of just aggressively growing my network in a targeted way. And I didn't really have a good plan other than I'm going to add people that may have opportunity. And it worked really well. I would advise anyone who's looking, like if there's job seekers, that's still one of the best ways to probably find opportunity is in your specific area, start growing your network in a very targeted way. HR managers, district managers, company owners, recruiters in your industry, bring them in and introduce yourself. But that kind of flow opened up tons of opportunities, interviews, job opportunities, and then probably 3 or 4 months in, something very specific kind of changed. Instead of just job offers, I started getting approached by investors who were looking to build restaurants, but were looking for operating partners. And in this whole process of growing my network, starting to post a little bit, I had become a visible restaurant operator in my city on LinkedIn, which, happened accidentally, but it's also really easy to do because there's no, especially 6 years ago, there's no restaurant operators who are trying to dominate their city on LinkedIn. There still isn't. So if that's if that's what you're trying to do, there's still no competition in your city to be the most visible whatever. So I actually took someone up. I had 3 or 4 of those offers. One of them seemed most attractive to me, and so yeah, we opened up a potbelly sandwich shop in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and then a year later, kind of convinced the investor to buy 3 existing shops in Louisville, Kentucky. Made the move, and then now I was kind of a district manager slash part owner of a small franchise,
Mm.
and that's when things really started opening up an opportunity because 2 things happened. A, I realized the power of LinkedIn was pretty incredible. And then B, I had the kind of job that gave me time and flexibility. It was very heavy lunch focused, and I had lots of free time in the afternoons, weekends. It wasn't something that was like overtaking my entire life. So I had the kind of the time and freedom to start building something on the side. And that's when I kind of started a little side hustle of trying to essentially help other people do what I had done with LinkedIn, grow a targeted network, produce opportunities. And it quickly turned from helping, job seekers and solopreneurs to helping companies use a process like that to bring in leads, find targeted prospects, reach out to them, start conversations and generate leads. So it turned into a lead generation agency, and we scaled from a dozen clients when we LLC'd it to 210 active clients at one time. In this probably a couple of years ago, and then went
Now,
through the acquisition.
yeah, let me ask, or maybe rewind just a little bit, because one of the things, because I mean, this started out as a side hustle. Hey, I don't know exactly how I'm going to leverage maybe LinkedIn or my network exactly, but I think there's an opportunity here. And then it presented itself as you were doing or got more involved in the restaurant industry and going through that. But then as you continued to go down that route, started the agency. Now, how did that work with the restaurants you're at? Did you just one day say, hey, this has gotten big enough, now I'll leave the restaurant industry and go LinkedIn full time with lead generation? Or did you keep your one foot in each camp? Or kind of how did you make that transition? Or kind of how did you to go through that?
I kept one foot in. I'm a very practical kind of person. I mean, I don't think you can be an entrepreneur without taking risk, but I'm also very much about taking calculated risks. So I kept the full-time job at the restaurant for as long as I could. I was working both essentially full-time. I got to the point where I was actually making as much from my side hustle as I was from my salary from the restaurant. So that was a really good place to be. And then my hand kind of got forced at one point. The pandemic hit, and restaurants got hit hard. We were laying off people, reducing our staff, and it seemed like the perfect opportunity. So I had two choices. I either had to cut staff at the restaurant and dive into that in order to save labor, make room for my salary. It can't be on top of these. I would have had to run a store again, and that would have probably meant I couldn't continue to grow my startup. Or I could pull back from the restaurants, drop my salary off of the books, which would free up time or free up the finances for those stores to run with the GMs and other people kind of looking over, and dive into the startup. So my partner actually approached me. We had a conversation. It almost just, I don't even know who suggested it first, because I think we're both thinking the same thing. He knew I was doing that side hustle, and it just seemed like the perfect opportunity. We both agreed, hey, you go do your thing. He'll make sure the restaurants are still going. We have a great team in place. And I kind of got the blessing to dive in full time to my startup. And so then I went from kind of double the income to at least replacing my full time income, which was okay. And then, yeah, just really dove in full time from there, and just kind of forced my hand.
No, and so makes sense. You kind of get hit with the not as much, I was gonna say opportunity, but with the reality of, hey, industry's changing a bit. I have to either adapt or decide which way I want to go and what the best prospects are, and then you make the decision and go accordingly. So said, okay, restaurant industry gets hit hard, pandemic, got this side hustle that is continuing to be better prospects and continuing to grow. So as you made that leap, when you initially made that leap, how did it go? Was it, hey, put all the time and energy in the side hustle, and you kind of mentioned replacing your salary, and did that continue to expand or figure things out, or kind of how'd that transition go from taking it more as a side hustle to your full-time focus?
Yeah, I probably got pretty lucky as far as the timing. So I got into LinkedIn and into LinkedIn lead generation at a time when it was getting a lot of traction. LinkedIn lead gen, especially the automated type of outreach, became really popular around that time. And I learned, so it actually grew pretty quickly. Thank goodness I didn't experience any major setbacks in that first, 6 months from that transition, because that could have been pretty bad. We had a good ramp. So probably that from the year that I dove in full time, I was able to almost get back to that point where I had like the dual income again. So I went from like doubling my income to at least like being, replacing my old income, and then growing it over the next year to almost be at that place where I was before. And then from there, I was pretty aggressive in my growth strategy. So I took what I needed to basically pay myself, and I rolled most of it back into the company, into marketing, into kind of creating a good foundation to grow from. So I was pretty aggressive with my growth strategies. I guess that got me in trouble sometimes, because there was times where I was forced with the decision to, I mean, we were making plans on big record months, and then we would have some hits and some setbacks. And that was probably what some of the hardest lessons I learned. And I was faced with decisions of, do I, cut back a couple of my team members, kind of like let a couple of people go? Do I cut back on my marketing and potentially slow down our growth that we've kind of relied on? Or do I take out a like working capital loan from PayPal? So there was a few occasions where I took out working capital loans from PayPal in order to make payroll without sacrificing any team or marketing spend, because I was really dependent on paid marketing to kind of fuel this growth, and then I needed the team that I had invested in to execute, and it would be a huge setback to cut off either of those. So I made those bets and took the loans, and that was a fun chapter and some big bets, I guess.
No, it sounds like it was, and it is one of those. It's hard. You want to reinvest, you want to continue to grow the business, and yet you have to, balance that with cash reserves and keeping enough to keep everybody busy and keep them going and fuel the business. And so sounds like you worked your way through it. So now and one of the other things I think you mentioned is, at some point you sold off a part of the agency and kept a part of the agency yourself. So maybe give us an idea how did that come about?
Yeah, so we got pretty deep into the lead generation side, and one thing that I'd always known is that eventually we'd have to kind of pivot or spread into other areas, because LinkedIn lead generation is specifically the kind of automated lead generation that we were doing was kind of like building a castle on the sand. Like we knew that LinkedIn algorithm could really destroy that opportunity. If they limited the number of connection requests you could send per day, which they did, if they released a patch that could better detect automation, all of these things, like if they started banning client accounts, like we would hemorrhage. So I slowly started to build out the LinkedIn ad side. And initially, around this time, I was actually approached on a Facebook ad of all things. They targeted me with the offer of a free valuation, and I had never even like really. I mean, I had kind of like thought and guesstimated like maybe what this thing is worth, but I'd never even thought to get in like official valuation. So they got me with that hook, which was really nice, kind of like lead gen model for them. They offer the free valuation, and then of course their next play is, hey, we also have a great network of buyers. We would list it for you for free. So they did the valuation, and it was more than I thought it was worth. And it was like that number where, it wasn't like some crazy number that I could like not work anymore, but it was like a number where I was like, okay, well, if someone approached me today with that in a check, I would give it real deep thought to actually selling, because I had never thought about like selling. It wasn't like a goal of mine. It wasn't my intention. But if someone walked up to me and actually offered me like that amount, like I would be stupid to not at least consider it. So then it really got me thinking. And so I let them list it. And as I don't have to pay anything unless I actually accept a deal. They find a buyer, I accept a deal, they'll take a percent. So I said, okay. Because now the next thing is like, you can tell me it's worth whatever, but is someone actually willing to pay that? Like I was pretty skeptical.
Hmm.
And I didn't know like their capability or their network, but we went with Website Closers was the company, and they did a great job. They have a great email list of buyers. They have a great marketing strategy. They had probably in the first 90 days, I had 5 or 6 different people that were kind of interested, and some of them were really lowball offers. It was really easy for me to say no. Some of them were like interested, but it really seemed like they wanted to like use our company for scrap and just get rid of most of the team, which I had never even thought about that either. Like, do I care what? I mean, I almost thought like, it's business as a transaction. If someone buys this, like, it's up to them what they do. But then I actually realized I really care what they would do with the company. Sentimental value. I love and invested in the team. So it then got me thinking like I really need, if I'm gonna do this, it has to be the right person. I care what they do with the company. So that was a learning experience because I'd never thought about that other side. So I interviewed with a few of these potential buyers, and then it became kind of like a two-way interview. Like I was really curious what their vision was, what their abilities were, and then it became very clear the other lesson through that I never thought of is there was the potential for someone to buy the majority share, but for me to stay on and continue to run things, which never crossed my mind as well. I thought someone would buy it, I'd have to find a new job. I hadn't even thought about that. I'm not ready to make a new startup yet. I don't got any crazy ideas going. So then I said, that was really appealing thought. Like, so you're saying I could cash out a decent chunk for what I've built, but not have to find a new job and still get paid to do like keep building this thing with my team, and I'd still be in control. Like that's sounding really good. So once I got 2 of those offers, then I was almost convinced like, yeah, if I got the right person, I would take a deal like that. And it all kind of came together where there was an investor who had no intention of running on his own, had no intention of micromanaging or getting rid of the team. In fact, the team was a big part of what he wanted to keep intact and wanted to have incentive plans and agreements to keep us together, and wanted to additionally infuse, a bigger investment and make investments in our growth over the next couple of years to make sure that we reach certain growth size. Because the other part of it was, if you only sell a portion of the company, when it sells again, you have another chance to get a piece of the pie. And if you partner with the right person who can accelerate that growth beyond what you could have done yourself, your second sale, even at a lower percentage, could be bigger than your first one, which again never crossed my mind. So it's like all these scenarios that had never crossed my mind. It was such a learning experience. Due diligence was ridiculous while you're still trying to run an agency. So it was a really good experience, but also pretty hard and difficult to navigate while still trying to run a business.
No, makes perfect sense, and sounds like quite the journey. So you sold off part of it, stayed on to still run it, manage it to a large degree, maintain that opportunity. So now catch us up a little bit to where you're at today. Are you still with there? Do you still run it? Do you manage it? Do you have any side hustles? Got a different direction? Any or all the above? Retired and living on an island area, wherever. Give us an idea of where you're at today.
So I did take the offer. I sold a good chunk of it, the majority share. I did agree to stay on and continue to run it. I was given a pretty nice incentive plan to get back even more percentage of the ownership over X amount of years, and some additional earnout if we have growth over the next certain growth metrics. So I was properly incentivized to stay on and to care about growing it. So yeah, I'm a year in. It's been about a year since the sale, so we're now in year two. I've moved into more of the marketing role. So I call myself like founder slash CMO, even though I guess technically I'm still the CEO. I've really dug into the marketing side. I have someone who's running the sales side, someone who's running the operations side. We've completely pivoted into the LinkedIn ads side of things. That's 95% of our revenue now, versus what it was when we sold it was like 90% LinkedIn outreach and lead gen. Now we're 95%. So we successfully pivoted into a LinkedIn ads agency. We also rebranded. It was called Link and Learn before, and now we're Impactable, impactable.com. The investor bought that impactable.com domain, I think, for 25 or 50,000. He paid more than I probably ever would have for a domain, but I've seen some domains go for a lot of money. So I think he paid 25 for it. And at this point, we've really transitioned also up market a little bit. Probably in the last 6 or 7 months, we've worked with more funded startups than we ever did previously. And so we're attracting a much higher tier of client, longer cycles with us, better LTV. So I'm pretty happy. The team is growing. We actually opened up a physical office. We were fully remote before. We opened up a physical office in San Antonio. So there's about 8 full-time people there. The rest of us are still, so we're about a little over 20 staff right now, and we're trying to focus on growing that San Antonio office. And kind of what's next is the other thing that the investor brought to the table is he's heavily invested in data over the last, I don't know, 20-30 years. One of his first companies that he founded was SoftServe, which has 13,000 employees, and then he has a dozen other companies. So what he brought to the table is we now are introducing some SaaS and data offerings, with data acquisition, our own kind of tools that we're bringing to the table, LinkedIn ad scheduling, a kind of audience tuning, some additional filters beyond what LinkedIn offers, and even like some of our own, we're working on a LinkedIn ads library. So some of that stuff is really cool that I would have never had kind of the access to bring to the table, and kind of infuse this as like a tech enabled service company, which is kind of what we're morphing into. So that's kind of cool. And yeah, I don't have any side hustle currently. I'm still growing like my personal brand on LinkedIn. I mostly just talk about LinkedIn ads and marketing in general. I did create like a little side website for like possible marketing consulting at one point, because I thought maybe, it'd be nice to have something on the side, but This is going really well, and it's kind of all consuming. And I'm pretty properly incentivized over the next few years to make this grow. So, if I want to make the most money I can, I'm actually properly incentivized to put all my effort into growing this, at least for the next 4 or 5 years, probably.
Oh, that's awesome. That sounds like sets you up to be in a great situation where you can continue to working on the projects and with the business that you love, and also provide a bit of an expanded opportunity on things. So that's great. So, well, as we're now wrapping towards the end of the episode, and we're at the present day of your journey, always a great time to transition to the two questions I always ask at the end. So we'll jump to those now. So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what'd you learn from it?
Um, Probably the worst business decision I ever made was, I mean, I can't really say. I would say not diversifying my acquisition channels enough. I was way too dependent on LinkedIn and LinkedIn ads at one point. Well, and it's been different things. Like at first, I was way overly dependent on Upwork. When I was first a freelancer, that was like 90%. And then something would change, my rating would drop, and like those leads would dry up. And then it happened again with LinkedIn, where because of a copyright name infringement, LinkedIn sent us a cease and desist letter over our name Lincoln Learn because it was too close to LinkedIn Learning. We lost one of our main acquisition channels, our ad account, over that, and those really hurt. So one thing that biggest mistake I've learned from is to diversify my acquisition channels, not be overly dependent on one. And that's why I really focus on like a multifaceted channel approach now, because I've been burned a few times and it hurts a lot.
Well, definitely, it's one where it's kind of a hard balance in the sense that if you diversify too much, especially early on, then you can lose focus, you can lose your messaging, and people don't know why they would even want to hire you. And on the other hand, if you get too niche or you don't have enough diversity, then it sets you up that you can get hammered. And so
Yeah.
definitely, easy mistake to make, but definitely a great one to learn from.
Yeah.
Second question I now always ask is, now if you're talking to someone that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
The one thing I would usually advise people on is, think about the team that you're building. So I come from restaurants, I come from service industry, and it became very clear to me early on in my career that in order to achieve the goals that I want to achieve, I can't do it on my own. I actually have to have a team under me. And when I was kind of like an arrogant, cocky college grad, I thought, this team that I was put in charge of were just like numbers on a spreadsheet there to like help me achieve my goals. But really, your team is one of the most important assets you can build. It's no different for a startup. Who you hire, the time and effort that you put into investing in your team is going to be like your growth multiple. It's going to get you through the bad times. If you have a loyal team that you've invested in, they're not going to jump ship, for a little more money or when times get rough. And they're going to be a team that can really stretch and help you grow and train the next layer. So, not just hiring robotic minions that do what you say, but hiring people that can think for themselves, that have thoughts that you can develop and invest in, is probably one of the biggest things that has been true for my career in the restaurant industry, and now again in the tech and marketing startup.
No, it sounds like it'd be a great piece of advice, and definitely makes sense. And I do think that that team can make or have a big impact for better and for worse, and on the business, and to make sure you have that right team in place is definitely a great takeaway. Well, as we wrap up, if people want to reach out to you, if they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
The best places usually are, you can email me, justin.r@impactable.com. You can visit our website, impactable.com, or you can look me up on LinkedIn, Justin Rowe. Usually I'm one of the top results that would come up there. We also have a really nice YouTube channel, probably one of the biggest resources for LinkedIn ads on YouTube, the Impactable YouTube channel. So those are probably the best places to find me or our company.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, connect, and otherwise engage with you, whether it's on LinkedIn or YouTube or anywhere else. And if nothing else, make a new best friend. So,
Yeah.
well, with that, thank you again, Justin, for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you, the listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners. If you can make sure to click share, subscribe, and leave us a review. It helps us to share all these awesome journeys with even more startups and small businesses. And last but not least, if you ever need help with your patents, your trademarks, or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com. Grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. So thanks again for Justin for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Awesome. Thank you.